Welcome back to another episode of Light Beer, Dark Money. I'm Sean Noble.
And I'm Chris Clements.
And we've got a special guest today.
We do. A good friend of mine, Jon Hunter, who I've known for 30-odd years, since his humble days as a Sigma Chi, pledge, I think, at the Northern Arizona University, Lumberjacks.
That's right. Technically, I'm a lumber devil.
You're a lumber devil, yeah.
I did a couple of years there, a couple of stints at a variety of community colleges, and then my illustrious conclusion at ASU. But yeah, some of the most fun days were Sigma Chi
and wasn't
AU.
John Desser, our good friend of the show, your pledge father?
No, my pledge father was a guy named Port Parker, who's a lawyer now, and grew up in a bar in Buckeye. And I needed
Grew up in a bar.
Yeah, his dad was a bouncer. And the reason this is a funny story is because I was a bit of a knucklehead. It's safe to say, and I needed.
See, when I first met you, I didn't think you were a knucklehead.
Yeah, well, yeah. Thank you for being so polite in your old age. But the reality is, Desser was more mature than everyone else and started guiding a lot of the pledges. But I had
Desser was more mature.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was funny when
I don't remember him in that vein back in 1920.
And I like to hear the stories of his immaturity because all we got was, prim and proper, read our materials, take our tests on time, behave properly. And so we had a lot of guidance on that, which we needed. In hindsight, we were blessed to have guys like Port. And, look, it goes out, a lot of people get a lot of bad news on fraternities, but my goodness, man, there was some great leadership learned and tested in those years in Flagstaff.
Well, and then, Sigma Chi is like a cult.
It can be.
I mean, it really is.
Can be. Everyone can be a cult.
When you meet somebody who's a Sigma Chi, they've got this whole ritual that they still do in their 50s. It's just
some
bizarre.
of them do. I think there's pockets of intensity in those circles. My youngest son's at Miami of Ohio, where it's the founder house. So, I've been testing some of those waters around the country through my kids, and it could go hot and cold depending on the school.
Well, it's great to have you here.
Yeah, great to be here.
For the interest of our listeners, I mean, you went to NAU and then you came back down to be a Sun Devil.
Yeah.
Because I believe I remember you saying that your father kind of gave you an ultimatum about
Yeah.
your life.
Well, look, let me back up. My mom and dad moved from the south side of Chicago. My mom was the oldest of 9. Her dad was a cop in Chicago. It's a really cool photo. There's a photo of him and all his children on his couch because they couldn't pay police officers enough to support a large family. So it's a really cool Chicago Tribune photo. And you see my mom at the top. And, met my dad, and they followed an apartment guy out here. Then he ended up working for Bill Schultz, if you know the Bill Schultz apartment community. So my dad became one of what they called the University of Schultz, because these guys all were being brought up and groomed up. And so I had this really cool childhood of growing up in the desert, riding dirt bikes. But school was going to be different for me. My older brother, 11 months older, Irish twin, Daniel, went to Phillips Exeter Academy, which I'd never heard of before. So it's not number 1 or 2 high school in the world. And my sister was an up and coming brilliant person as well. My dad was a priest for 12 years. My mom was a nun, and you can argue if you knew my dad, he was basically a PhD in theology. So I tell you all that just to set the tone for I just felt like an idiot in this community. I mean, I woke up every day with a dude speaking multiple languages, reading James Joyce, a book a day, and I'm just dyslexic and having a hard time. And I just had this nun-like mom, just disciplined, hard work, helping me get through, grade school. And I was really great socially. I was better at sports, getting in trouble quite a bit, just different than those around me. And so it actually became the framework for my podcast, kind of this half monk, half hitman, kind of feeling you're a little different in life.
Yeah, you have a great podcast called Hunter X.
Yeah, hunterxlife.com, where I basically, as I tell the story, just try to come up with these attributes that we all have in our lives of what we're good at. And so in my case, I was able to pick up a little bit from the intellectual depth of my mom and dad and my brother and sister, fought my way through school, never quit, went up to NAU. My roommate was a guy named Tony Wursler. He was a quarterback. Darrell Bevel went up there that year, famous coach now for the Dolphins. Darrell and we all went to high school together as well. I went to Saguaro High School, graduated in 88 for those keeping score. And so, went up there, never played football, but was around those guys, joined the fraternity, met my wife, Lori Walker, up there, Jimmy Walker of Celebrity Fight Night and other fame and, play. I think he holds the scoring record at Central High School for, he gets stopped. And you ever go to a dinner with Jimmy, everyone's stopping him and reminding him of Central High School or ASU. Played for the Sun Devils. I think he tells it like he rode the bench. But, he had, met Lori up there. Mickey Walker was our president of the school and the president of our fraternity.
Mickey Walker, who's Lori's cousin.
So I just, oh my gosh, I got to meet this girl.
Also Sigma Chi.
Sigma Chi, and
also connected to our friend John Dessler.
Yeah.
In many ways. That's actually kind of how I met you. That whole Walker Dessler cabal.
And I think that's kind of, there's some consistent values in everybody. Mickey's this great spiritual believer. He knew how to apply those beliefs and values in college at a young age, where a lot of us were just grappling with surviving. And
he discipled John.
Yeah, he did.
I mean, he really did.
He did. Yeah. He did.
I mean, when John met Mickey, all of a sudden he had somebody in his life who was pushing him on this idea, about this guy named Jesus, and
that was such a foreign.
And John was
subject.
like, "What the heck are you talking about?"
In those years, man, it was just a blur, But to your point, so I go up to NAU, and I was struggling. I would sign up late for my classes, so I'd have these 7 a.m. freezing cold, and you'd wake up and you'd go, I'll just buy the notes. There's no way I'm going to this class. This is not going to end well. And then you don't buy the notes, and then Alan Elm, Elm would say, hey, let's go to Main Street and play Monopoly. I'm like, dude. I'm like, noon. So you'd find us in Main Street, which is no longer there, playing Monopoly, eating peanuts, from noon until 4. And then some days it was
and just drinking beer.
Yeah, what was the game where you're conquering countries?
Risk.
We became Risk, experts, and we would just bring in other friends and fraternity members. But that caught up to me one day. My dad knew I didn't have the self-esteem to raise my hand. I was living with a fraternity brother in an apartment, and he sent my sister up and just said, yep, Dad wants to do this another way. And I went, yep. I didn't fight it. I knew it. And I use it as a teaching moment for a lot of young folks about the relief that came out of me as I knew I was in an untenable situation. I had a lot of fun. I had learned a lot, but it was time for me to grow. And one of the things was watching guys above you, who knew how to manage the partying and manage their schoolwork, and were growing up right in front of you. And you got this sense of, oh my goodness, I got to get my act together. And so went down, turned out to be the best years of my life because I got to go live with, Aristotle. Is the way I tell people. I felt like I was Alexander the Great, running around with Aristotle for a few years because I got to go home, went to Scottsdale Community College, started taking my basics, then transferred, lived at home, and just had this guy sitting next to me to just tutor me and help me now that my mind was open to learning, really learning. In hindsight, those were magical years. Of course, in the beginning, you think I'm an idiot. Everyone's laughing at me. And then you realize, no one's laughing at you. Everyone's going through their own stuff. And, ended up having a great time at ASU and really dug into criminal justice. My major was justice studies, the minor in political science, and I just fell in love with all those really tough subjects like recidivism and juvenile justice in particular became a topic, and it was just a great education.
That's great. That's fantastic. Sometimes it's those years, when you're, we know this for a fact. I mean, those years when you're kind of beaten down and you got to find a path forward and you got to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
That's those, you look back at those as formative, obviously, but also transformational.
There's no question about it, and sometimes we just need that gentle bumper, like a bumper pull, in us, life, dads, uncles, friends, who could just bumper you. He was, I had such a very probably fragile self-esteem personality at the time. I think if my dad would have approached me any more aggressively, what's wrong with you? What the heck? Or you wasted all this money. I think I probably would have just become a street thug or a union pipe fitter. I just would have given up on academia. I would have given up on developing myself. I was, yeah, you're right. My siblings, my parents are all these smart people, and I'm this moron. And I would have. So I really am appreciative of the gentleness of having someone like that. It's to gently, help me keep moving, but we're going to do it differently. Yeah. And then once I really learned how to learn, I fell in love with learning.
That's great.
Speaking of learning, you've got some insight on what has happened over the last week or so with the demise of Silicon Valley Bank.
Yeah.
Give us a little insight on what's happened and whether or not this is going to continue to be an issue.
Yeah, well, a great question. So if I just go back a minute, so I come out of ASU, I go work at Mastering Computers. First, just give you context of why I'd have a point of view on Silicon Valley Bank and tech. I jump in, start selling training software over the phone. I'm told I'm pretty good at it. I have no context on that. The first time I've ever heard that I'm good at rapport, I'm good at retorts, I'm good at objection handling, but I did realize I started to get an inkling I liked tech. It was moving. It had a fast pace to it. It's innovative. And then I went and interviewed at a company called Computer Associates because I knew I couldn't sit still. I needed to be some kind of outward maneuvering of position in life. I interviewed with this woman, and she could tell I'm full of crap, halfway through it. And she's just like, don't call us, we'll call you. And I'm like, no, you got to let me come back. And she's like, we got 30 guys in that hallway waiting. And I said, ma'am, those guys have been doing the same thing wrong for 30 years. You got to let me come back. I came back and I wrote a paper called Eat What You Kill. I wrote it with my dad. And it was my assessment of Charles Wang, who's the founder of Computer Associates, who ended up becoming a billionaire, owning the Islanders. And some of this is true for this kind of, where we're going in Silicon Valley Bank. But, it was basically a founder culture, eat what you kill. If you do well, make a lot of money. If you don't do well, you don't make any money. Low frills, stay in front of the customer. It's not for the faint of heart. This is an industry, and I've written about it multiple times, that tech is not, it's the most competitive industry on the planet, mainly due because, I can charge you $1 million for something you can't touch, can't feel, don't have to ship it, don't have to store it. And I can charge you millions and millions of dollars for it, depending how fast you're running it on your computers or in the cloud. So if you just keep that in the back of your mind, that's been going on for a long time. Why I like that, because it breeds in for what I call corporate athletes, people that want to, be competitive, want the upside in their life by taking chances and risk, but also don't complain and don't point fingers, don't feel entitled. And probably the anti-entitlement is probably, if you were to put something on my gravestone, that would probably be it. Right, I'm not entitled to anything in charge. I was there 18 years, so I get that job by that presentation. And there's a bunch of funny stories with it. And that became one of the most ruthless / professionally successful sales teams of all time. If you've ever heard of Oracle or Salesforce or others, a lot of their leaders today were born and bred at a CA, and Computer Associates was the name of it. And so with that framework, that platform, that foundation, you have this balance that I fell in love with, but was tricky. Right, we need to move fast. I always tell, we have big banners in our offices. We need to move with an outrageous sense of urgency and purpose tomorrow. Like, we got to move now. There's no waiting, because we could be acquired, because the IP, the value of the company. So the pace required a certain level of action and attitude and mission that not a lot of people have the stomach for. At the same time, it requires this monk-like savviness and planning and strategic thinking. And if you don't have both, you're going to end up in trouble. And so I would tell you, for me, Silicon Valley Bank is an example, a metaphor, a little bit higher level, about where those two things can get really upside down. The valuations of the companies. So I was running Micro Focus's publicly traded company, chief revenue officer up to 2020. COVID hits. We had just moved a sales rewards club, 800 people out of Hawaii, almost canceled them out of Hawaii. We ended up sending a subset of them. But we had to start getting ready for this thing called COVID. And I saw Chris this the other night. One of the assessments, we created a black swan team, a small one, to just study 2008, study other calamities, study other patterns. So we didn't go too aggressively or too passively into this thing. And one of the things that we realized immediately was the technology we used to communicate had advanced considerably. It just caught everybody off guard. Holy crap, Zoom works, right? We're so used to Cisco gear and older gear, legacy cloud, legacy networks. And it sounds maybe trivial today, but we were already starting to ratchet down expense and laying people off, like everyone probably should have.
Right.
with basic mathematics and being profitable, being a key positive in life. So that was the first thing I'd tell you. With COVID comes in, and everyone gets this immediate gratification of, oh my goodness, they can buy and transact software over Zoom. So you get this immediate euphoric, hey, put the pause on, things are going to be fine. And then you had this work from home phenomenon, and but some skeptics out there saying, look, is this stuff real? And this is before stimulus, and this is before government packages, which clearly impacted, especially in tech. So the first thing you get is this behavior of, oh my goodness, we can communicate and transact virtually, digitally. Then you have this, so we don't make really a lot of changes. Things are going to be good. I mean, think about that now.
Right.
We're going through a pandemic. All of my people and most of my customers should be locking everything down. But you get this initial euphoria that said, no, wait a minute. You know what? And then some of the legislation starts passing, and then you get tech companies selling to tech companies, VCs selling to VCs. So then on top of that, think about the private company phenomena. To me, it just stands out as always been part of the problem. Who's evaluating your worth? And Silicon Valley Bank is in there, the VCs are in there, and they're saying, well, we're a unicorn. Are you guys familiar with the unicorn?
Yep.
So I find it fascinating. Remember now, I've been profitable my whole life as a tech guy. So, and I get made fun of for that. I'd be mocked for that. Like, oh, you're the old dude. You're with that thinking is old. You need to grow. And I get it. You go at Salesforce and other examples. But it's a slippery slope of this thing. And now it's funny, someone who was mentioning the word unicorn may be a stale term. I said, I wouldn't call it stale. Why don't we unpack unicorn? Has anyone ever actually seen a unicorn? And the phenomenon started because it's not real.
Right.
So I think it started literally as a almost high-level joke that said, hey, we've got 30 million of recurring revenue. We're meeting all these really cool metrics for other VCs to value. So we're now valued at $1 billion, and the $1 billion marker valuation became the unicorn. So what I've seen in this market,
Because it's fake.
Yeah, you guys, it's a unicorn. Why didn't you have more fun with it? Well, one of the things is you would have been ostracized from the industry.
Why don't you call it a stallion?
You know what I mean? That's what I said. Why don't you call it an Arabian? Call it an Arabian.
The white horse.
Call it a really fast, cool, strong horse that's going to run forever, as opposed to a flash in the pan idea that you just hope to God you can sell to somebody else or take it in a SPAC or take it public. So somebody's staring at their paper money. And that paper money phenomenon is real.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, man, I've looked in people's eyes, good people, spiritual people. It is Lord of the Rings. It is the precious. I've seen the precious get to really go back and watch the movies when all these good people pick up the ring. They do a really good job of portraying really good people starting to go, well, wait a minute, what about me? Or what about my money or my power? And that's a very real phenomenon in that particular industry. So if you just kind of follow some of that governance, the money coming into the market, so now people are seeing deals that they know are not repeatable. You never really took maybe COVID as seriously as you should have because of the technology. But my goodness, if you go stare at your RSUs and your stock options, you're going, yeah, but I'm worth $2.8 million, $40 million. 100 million. I mean, there are CROs, guys in my role, men and women in my role, chief salespeople who are being the 40 to 150 million range. If they could just hang on, just hang on. So, but the voices. One voice is saying, "This is not real. This is fake. This is fool's gold." The other voice, "Hey, shut them up. Just hang on, and it'll happen. And if it happens, we can go live that life." And there's so many spiritual connections to it. Of feeling your life will be better in the future, and all of that I've just picked up on. And on top of that, is, the bank in particular just made some really goofy, bad decisions that I do believe are isolated to Silicon Valley Bank. And
yeah, but what you're describing is sort of this vicious business cycle. I'm glad we're getting into this. We don't get to talk about this nearly enough. Of that pursuit of the unicorn, of that pursuit of something that isn't real, versus building something that's long lasting, that's real, that's tangible, and we saw it in the .com crash in 2000. We've seen it in the real estate market. I mean, that was paper. It was funny money, and it's always this pursuit of the funny money. It seems like.
Well, it's only funny money.
The .com was you described it actually very appropriately. It's like we have some revenue, we have an evaluation, we have a product, it's in development, we might get it to market, but we're not quite sure. But we have all this money coming in.
And think about it. There's no
betting on this idea.
VCs are setting their own valuations. If you really think about it, they're setting their own valuations. They're coming up with these metrics. They're forward-leading indicators. Well, if we get X amount of ARR, X amount of churn, X amount of expansion, we're so just going up, and up and up. And just look, I consider myself to be the Forrest Gump of business. Like, you got to solve a real problem, and you got to eventually make money. And so a lot of goofiness just got into the market, from hiring weird people, doing weird things that do not, and that kind of comes back to the early Charles Wang days. Like, we were really thin and lean. Like, be in front of the customer with donuts in the data center at 6 a.m. Yeah. Back to no entitlement. Right. Solve a real problem, charge for that problem, deliver on that problem, but don't add up a lot of complexity and a lot of confusion. And part of all this has been just, I think, a lack of business 101 fundamentals. And you're starting already to see them come back. You're seeing some layoffs from people going, yeah, I'm almost glad we got those done, because now we can go back to building real long-term plans on data and conversion metrics and science. So we can go build a culture. How are you going to build a culture if your platform and your foundation is not built correctly? Yeah. That's where the people hear the rhetoric from the C level, and you'll see it in Silicon Valley Bank, because it's such a dichotomy of all those people in one pool, one pond. All the VCs are there, the banks that funded them are there, the founders are there, the recruiters are there, and they're all staring at each other as they took money, lent money, and did all this goofy stuff. And so there's going to be some casualties, but and the last thing I'll say on that is, it is interesting, as we watch the youth take over a lot of these jobs. I mean, I remember being on my Black Swan call, and I was like, hey guys, let's go back to 2008, and let's go pull back our memories of how we navigated the recession. And I think a third of the team was like, well, we weren't here a lot. We weren't here. We weren't here. Well, early 9/11. Like, what's that? What was that? There was one. I mean, it became just an eye opener of just not making assumptions that everybody that you're talking to has the same frame of reference. I've seen so many recessions. I've seen so many. It teaches you to be really lean and mean and disciplined on your spending. And that is just not par for the course anymore.
And yet, why do we see the same mistakes being made?
Well, I think you're underestimating, again, back to the precious. I mean, it's one thing to say it's funny money when it's not your money. When it's someone else's money, I'm telling you, man, I've seen people who absolutely intellectually understand the parameters of this paper money and still get corrupted by it. Yeah. It is, and especially if you have real examples next to them. I mean, tech has some examples where there's people driving multiple Ferraris, and they're sitting in big homes because what I call some of that shortcut-itis paid off. And so guys like me, aren't attracted. Like, well, what am I preaching? I'm preaching drinking water, doing burpees, eating non-processed meat, and building what I call lean muscle mass in companies for the long haul. And they're like, well, I could do that, or that dude's got a pill over there. I can take that pill, and I could just get my valuation tomorrow. Right. And so all these guys were in this 18-month window. 18 months, triple this, and this. And so there's a shortcut-itis. That's I think in culture in general, that is pervasive in general. No one wants to wait. Young people today don't want to be VPs after 15 years. They want to be VPs, and we have all kinds of examples of young people wanting promotions immediately. Yeah.
Or just jumping out and saying, I'm going to do my own thing.
Correct. I'm king now.
Without any real world experience.
No real world experience, and it's, hey, look, why not? Netflix was immediate. Uber Eats is immediate. Therefore, my mom overparented me to. I'm a big believer in some of the Simon Sinek work in this particular generational gap, where the immediacy comes from the overparenting and how that can lead to this behavior where it's now and it's not enough. Yeah, it's immediate and it's too little.
Yeah, and that's indicative of the culture itself. And then the basic. I mean, going back to Silicon Valley Bank. I mean, for over 40 years, it's they weren't not doing good things over the course of that 40 years. But to your point, I mean, I heard this yesterday. They went from having like $40 billion in deposits just, 10 years ago or whatever it was, and that tripled over the course of the pandemic and all this
Right.
all this money flowing into them.
Well,
And then where do you lend it? Where does it go? And then they got caught with
No.
the interest rate
No
issues and the
yeah.
interest rate hikes, and
which
with
was-
a lot of
which
bonds
was
that now are
as-
junk.
which was obvious to anybody watching.
Yeah,
I mean,
but they did nothing for 9 months, 9 or 8 months. They did nothing.
Well, I also think that's where we can talk about groupthink. We're talking about politics, groupthink.
Well, look at their board.
If you're staring at each other in a vacuum in any community, you just don't have to be a Harvard Business School graduate to watch for groupthink, to watch for de-risking. I mean, you just look at the de-risking. Everything I just said about those valuations, even if you believe in them, there's a certain amount of, that's a risky business you're in, right? You're not putting
Right.
money into DuPont. You're putting money into, this $40 million recurring revenue startup, because if it pays off, it's gigantic. But the odds of that, why do you think private equity is such a safer bet? Because they have different risk thesis.
Yeah.
So this is the riskiest risk thesis, and they're all in on it, and then they're trading. It kind of felt like the mortgage debacle back in 2008 a bit, how intertwined it was. It's such a
Yeah.
group of people
That's
in
a
a particular
great comparison.
in a particular bubble. And so look, I'm a believer. I think it's going to be good. I'm an optimistic person. I think the fundamentals will come back. I think profit will come back. I think companies will get acquired that should get acquired, and no business being independent. I think all those leaders I got kind of mocked at and felt like an idiot because they wanted to build sustainable long-term plans will become in vogue again. And it's, part of, this is capitalism. And that's why I hope there's a certain amount of accountability at Silicon Valley Bank for making bad decisions. And so people can learn from it and we can get better from it.
Well, certainly, and hopefully there's going to be some accountability to those executives that sold their stock a couple days before the implosion.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well,
That's
they've all
sort of
been
like
fired.
business 101. Like, no, you can't do that. Yeah, we'll see what the Justice Department does. But Janet Yellen, our esteemed Treasury Secretary, admitted to Congress today in a congressional hearing in the Senate that CCP-linked Silicon Valley depositors will be bailed out by U.S. banks.
Well, yeah. I mean,
And it's like, this is the stuff that drives everyone nuts.
yep.
I always tell people, when they ask me about politics, I vote for the Green Party, the Revenue Party. Because,
Yeah, exactly.
I just got too many people in my life globally who have good points on left and right. You can't sideswipe it and be Pollyannish about it. You need to have some substance in your point of view, but you just learn in these roles to be extremely empathetic to how government works. CIA, we remember doing a deal with the U.S. Army, and I remember doing a review, and I got in there, and I'm a huge patriot. I'm into my country as you can get, but I'm also a business person. So we're doing this deal with the U.S. Army, and it's getting up to like 150 million. And I remember the way they were guiding us to do the deal. I can't remember what administration this was. I just remember going, okay, we can do all that. We're going to get this huge deal, and I'm going to look really good. And I remember as a citizen going, this is the stupidest thing I've ever freaking seen. Why are we doing this deal? It was all about OPEX and CAPEX and making, because they had a continuing resolution going on or something like that. So what do you do as a capitalist? You figure out a way to make it work in that environment. And so I ended up eventually finding my way to the Pentagon and meeting with the CIO and trying to figure out a way to, guys, eventually this can will get kicked down the road. I'm thinking I'm going to make a difference. I'm not just going to be the capital. I'm going to be the politically astute sales guy.
I'm going to take on the bureaucracy.
Yeah, it's funny is, what you get there was, 4-star generals tap out up to 2. I started getting read the riot act all the time about how, yeah, that's a great idea, John, but no one's going to be here. That'll take 7 to 10 years. We're all out of here, and you know what I mean. We had these in the military. They had like these requirements for length of time, and the DoD CIO was a presidential appointee, and I just remember it really did tap into my a little bit of my idealism, and I try not to lose that, because it keeps me optimistic and it keeps me challenging the status quo, but also. you got to go in the real world with, real world kind of expectations.
Yeah.
As I got schooled a few times in the government.
Well, you encountered the swamp.
Yeah.
That's what we call the swamp.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
and that's a derogatory term for it, because there are good people working in government, but that's the term of people who've been there for 30, 40 years and they just don't leave. And then you have the people, the more competent people who, rotate in and out.
Yeah, that's right. In that example, I think Terry Takai had become CIO of the DoD. And I remember I was trying to bring her commercial examples from American Express and Citibank and Wells Fargo, how to rationalize, how to take cost out, how to really, And the good news is they did become in vogue. So now the larger government agencies do share and model some examples of large corporate. But in the beginning, they're just like, no, we're different. We're so different. But I've been in this game for 30 years. I've been in every major data center, security environment you can think of, and you just know the government can be run better. It can be. It's not easy by any means, and I'm not naive now on some of the restrictions, but there has been some progress made.
No
Well, that's
question.
encouraging.
No question.
Now, let's switch to, in terms of giving of your time and your community involvement. Your wife's family has been, a stalwart supporter of a massive charity here in the Valley of the Sun, Celebrity Fright Night, for a bazillion years.
Yeah.
And you kind of passed the baton last year.
Yeah, you did.
And you were on that board for, gosh, how many years? And really were
really about 17 to 20 years.
We're responsible for so much of what
Yeah.
Fight Night was.
Well, I'll tell you
was
about it.
Jon Hunter.
Yeah, well, look, again, I'm always trying to do something I can for where I live in Arizona. So this, when Jimmy, remember Fight Night started, him and Jerry Colangelo are really close. It started as a Michael Carbajal gym deal at the Ritz. Jimmy's office was right there in the Esplanade. And then, Muhammad moves here a little bit later, and they get connected. And a lot of people consider Jimmy to be one of the top 10 networkers in the world. I mean, he really has a gift of building networks. And a lot of that is proven out by the people that would attend Fight Night. But my angle to it, for what it's worth for you guys, was, I'm sitting there, I'm always looking for a unique experience with customers and partners and business. Like what, I realize I don't play golf. I haven't figured out how you can sell software and play golf. So for all you guys out there that have figured it out, you can either show me the handbook or you're not working hard enough. That's
Right.
what my boss has always told me.
In a quarter of a century, I never figured out how to sell beer. And play golf.
Yeah, you go. There you go.
I mean,
I had a boss once tell me, I felt so bad about it. He's like, John, when people ask you that, you tell them because I work. And you tell them to pound sand. But I, a lot of our customers had been to the golf thing. I didn't golf. And I'm sitting there growing up, and I'm watching this really cool environment. So Muhammad moves here, and he immediately gets linked up with Jimmy, just these two guys, and they hit it off immediately, which is really fascinating because you have this really outspoken Muslim with this outspoken, born again Christian, and they just had fun over 25 years poking at each other about their faith in a really lovely, gentle way.
Sure.
And it started, and that's when they said, hey, why don't we switch this thing? And I just can't tell you, man, what his likeness did for everybody that ever met him. I'd been doing it for so long. It was just a life-changing experience just to watch people from Celine Dion to the local truck driver who I've experienced meet Muhammad Ali personally, and watch them start shaking and watch them start, especially in the early years. Remember, Muhammad was really isolated for a lot of years before he came to Arizona. I mean, he lit the torch in the Olympics, and he was really not doing well with his Parkinson's diagnosis.
Sure.
In general, was my understanding. And he moves to Phoenix, and we take him to the Suns. My first thing was to a Suns game. You guys man like this. So my wife calls me up on the brick Motorola phone,
Right.
which is what I had. I'm flying around selling software. And she said, you got to come to the Phoenix Suns Arena. You're Muhammad Ali's bodyguard. I said, this is crazy. It must be a creative way to get me a ticket. We go on there. At this point, no one had seen him for years. So the place went nuts. Suns were great at the time. Jerry was running the team. And there was, my in-laws, my wife, Muhammad Ali, one chair, and two cops. And I went, oh, wow. That's a clever way to get me a ticket. and I get on the floor, and then the cops say, well, and first Jimmy said, hey, this is Muhammad Ali. I want you to meet Jon Hunter. And it was just unbelievable. And his speech was pretty good at the time. And we had, we said hello, shook my hand. And then the cop said, well, what's the autograph policy? And I'm like, Jimmy, if you know Jimmy, you're not getting his attention if there's sports going on or business going on. Right. I get no love. So I'm like, guys, I think we'll go light on the autographs. Let's go light. And then he asked me for a Baby Ruth. And I didn't know what to do. And, I'm national TV, most recognizable person in the world is asking for Baby Ruth. So people always ask me, what do you do? I go, I'm a good sales guy. I go, I did nothing. I acted like I didn't hear it. And he turned to me again. And he was like, give me a Baby Ruth. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I call up that concierge lady. I get her over there, and I got the champ at Baby Ruth, and which he proceeded to make a mess of on national TV. I heard about it later from his wife Lonnie. But he told jokes that whole day. We went back to the hotel room that night, and him and Jimmy sparred over New Testament scriptures, which was absolutely fascinating. But the key to me was, bringing my customers into these business sessions, what we end up calling high-value networking. This ability to bring, what I found is nobody wants to be sold anything in life. They want to solve problems together. And so we used it as a place for key executives to come meet with one another. We would talk about Parkinson's. We would talk about neurological diseases. And people would open up and become vulnerable about their own lives, what's going on in their own families. And it just grew to this massive event where we were able to build this really deep trust technology executives and also raise money to help the champ. And we did that for 20 plus years.
Yeah, it's amazing legacy.
Yeah, it got up to one of the top 10. He now does one in Italy. So Jimmy's still doing a Fight Night Italy with Bocelli and for other charities. And it's led to all kind of relationships and experiences. It's just a game changer for all of us.
Yeah. Are you going to continue to be involved? As this transitioned?
No. I was off the board, and it's after Muhammad passed away, then it moved on, and now it's supporting cancer and some other initiatives. But yeah, I love raising money. It's so funny. I think when you go after a cause that you believe in, and it's true that it's about a real problem, and you make it. We used to take people down to tour the Muhammad Ali Center, and people wanted to go there than go to a golf. They want to go see people hurting, and this was the beginning for me also on the pain on caregivers. That's now big time in Alzheimer's, because there were some synergies between Alzheimer's and Parkinson's at the time.
Yeah.
Learning about it, and one thing you learn about is the pressure on caregivers. That's what we were end up all talking about was, oh my goodness, how much support people need to take care of someone with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
So I'm doing some charitable stuff now. I'm joining a board of Be One to Lead One. It's bringing some help and leadership context to 7th and 8th grade and high school kids in certain communities that come from parents that haven't been to college. So you can teach them respect and dignity and self-esteem, and you just spend a couple hours a week with them. I'm coaching executives who are looking to take their lives to the next level, or looking kind of to lay down this framework of kind of no entitlement, the water, the broccoli, the non-processed meat metaphor for your life. And it kind of follows my own personal journey, which is being, hey, if you felt like the idiot who had smart people all around him and then didn't quit, and build out your own story, which my story was, hey, ASU gave me an award a few years ago, the Class Leader Award. So I went back, and you guys may find this interesting. One of the things that came out of that discussion was in large corporations, one of the biggest things missing is intellectual leadership training. Mm-hmm. Some of the stuff that happened in Silicon Valley Bank, is how you build culture, it's how you build trust, it's how you scale, it's how you delegate. It's how you really manage people and how you manage data. But if you use the word academic in business, it's often viewed as a negative term. So it was this, Dr. Pat Kenny, who works for Dr. Crow, he really became, he became a real advocate for me in this topic of kind of bringing the worlds closer together. And part of that journey was me telling the kids, well, what do you use most in business from ASU? And I said psychology and statistics. Summary level data and people, everything around people, influencing people, your EQ scores, self-awareness, empathy, self-control, how to understand your brand, how to scale, how to set boundaries. And I wouldn't have known it at the time. And then at CA, where I was for 18 years, the last 4 years we had a Dr. Lou Tice on our staff for 2 years. We had a gentleman named Dr. Pat Latore, a culture coach, for 2 years. We were in intensive leadership development, really teaching us. The only thing like it would be something like at IBM or at Xerox back in the day, where you really wanted leaders developed. And it was just funny how today, in Silicon Valley in particular, a lot of that has gone out the window because of that win now, kind of precious mentality. If you don't see yourself in a job for 10 years, why would you do it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you're planting seeds that are really not going to grow in 18 months, and that is something that I'm finding a lot of value giving back on in coaching, and it's consulting and advising companies on.
That's fantastic. So you just flipped it.
I did flip it. I'm trying to flip it. I'm finding it, either people believe in it. It's kind of back to the, get skinny quick, or do you want to learn burpees? And the people who want the quick, get skinny quick, I'm just not your guy. I'm not your guy to run your company. I'm not your guy to be your CEO. I'm not your guy to be your CRO. But if you want to really build lean muscle mass for your company, or political institutions or government, I think the same rules should apply, like no entitlement thinking, long-term planning, people plans that are authentic and real. You don't need to tell employees they're perfect and here's all the money and title, and
Right.
they'll follow you if there's integrity and they're getting better and there's authenticity around them being developed.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping,
Old school.
it's funny. I think it's going to come in vogue again.
We like old school.
Yeah,
We are old school.
I mean, it kind of becomes a recurring situation, because the things that the time and tested and true. I don't know exactly how I'm trying to say that, but that stuff works. I mean, it's because there is actual evidence that these things work.
Well, I mean, even going back to your initial point and this initial story that you shared about at the beginning of the pandemic, you realized, well, we have all this technology, we can actually make some of this stuff work, and with Zoom and everything else. But at the end of the day, the old things survive. Personal connection,
Sure.
personal understanding, relationships,
Totally.
connection.
So that
you can't get that on a Zoom call.
So here's one thing we knew right
much
away.
as you
We
try.
knew that concluding a deal with a C-level executive that had been in the works for 2 years was doable over digital. That was doable. What no one knew, and they're finding out now, is all the net new virtual. So remember, it went from events for 800 people in person, learning and going through materials, to the marketing team's getting super excited because 1,800 people showed up virtually. And all this, what they considered the pipeline, everyone who's being honest with themselves in this business, it doesn't not necessarily relegated to tech, had a voice that said, I don't know if this pipeline is real. I don't know if any, but they got their bonus, they got their metrics, and then they built OpEx around, and they started spending money around it.
Yeah.
Because it became this, self-fulfilling prophecy, which is, guess what, guys? Not only can we sell the pipelines, we don't need those events anymore. Those trusted relationships are oversold. The software just sells itself, and we don't need, and so it just became this really gross house built on the shakiest foundation. Not all of them. There are companies right now that are not laying off, that are doing really well, that I believe had the courage to stick to their guns, and courage when they looked at the money or taken another round of financing and said no. There's a big movement right now on self-funding and bootstrapping, and how powerful bootstrapping is compared to taking VC money.
Yeah, well, especially since you can retain the value, and that's a better payoff in the long run.
Well,
sure.
it's value, it's control, it's integrity, it's just fool's gold.
Yeah.
I think now they realize if someone sells you that, now the mindset's going to be like, hey man, that's not realistic.
Yeah.
And I'd rather have control, and I'd rather run it the right way, which I think is going to be eventually a really cool outcome of this
Yeah,
climate.
better to have 500 to 800 people at a real sales, gathering than 1,000 unicorns.
Yeah.
So,
again.
John, how can people get a hold of you? I mean, obviously you've got a lot to offer, and if there's someone who's listening that wants to reach out, what's the best way to reach you?
Well, give me hunterxlife.com. The name kind of, I threw life in there because I find a lot of the stuff I'm preaching and coaching on, advising on is more than just selling software. So you can find me at www.hunterxlife.com. I have a podcast there I'm about to go do season 2 of. And my podcasts for now are just really straight. I'm pumping out kind of some of these Forrest Gump morsels, like 7 minutes or less. And then from there, I reach out to people who call me and email me, and they want to talk deeper and advise. And it's been a great platform to engage.
Great.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah,
Thanks
thanks
for your
for your
friendship.
time.
Thanks for your leadership in our community. We appreciate
I
it.
thank you guys for having me.
All
It's been
right.
Great.
Well, God bless.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening.
Take care.